is maths discovered or invented? The world today is dominated by maths, from the computer that you're watching this on to satellites orbiting the Earth at 17,000 miles an hour. And since the dawn of modern civilization, mankind has been questioning whether maths is a human construct or the native language of the universe, whether maths would exist if humanity didn't. The debate began in its modern form over 2,000 years ago in 5th century BCE Greece, where Pythagoreans claimed numbers were divine constructs that made up the world around us and existed whether humans were there to observe them or not. They put forward the idea that everything was a product of mathematics, from the air to the grass, and went on to prove many now accepted mathematical truths, such as the angles in a triangle adding to 180 degrees. Of course, they once sent a man into exile because he claimed root 2 wasn't a fraction, so perhaps they're not an entirely trustworthy source. Maths can, of course, also be found in nature, supporting the idea that it's discovered, with the Fibonacci sequence being found everywhere, from famously in the seed heads of pine cones in sunflowers to nautilus shells in the shape of hurricanes as they form, from cracks that form in mathematical patterns in the dry dirt to bubbles forming according to Plato's laws. Maths plays a crucial role in the universe, affecting every aspect of our day-to-day lives. And if we zoom out even further, then spiral galaxies even form in predictable shapes in accordance to the golden ratio, and we use maths to evidence dark matter and energy that we'd have no idea about otherwise. Much of modern physics is built on the idea that maths works as a set of fundamental universal laws, which govern the actions of all objects, from the movement of galaxies to subatomic particle collisions. An interesting thought experiment is to take this back to its logical extreme. If maths governs the actions of all particles, which govern electrical impulses, which govern your brain, then is your action predetermined by mathematics? If someone had all the information in the present universe and a hell of a lot of time, could they determine the outcome of everything simply by progressing the formulas? It seems to be entirely your personal choice whether you choose to raise your hand in 3 seconds or not, but perhaps that's already been decided, as electrical impulses already set in motion after that reading could be followed and your action determined. Of course, I doubt that excuse would hold up in a court of law. Perhaps given an infinite number of universes, there is an infinite number of choices to make, and each time you make a decision, there is an alternate universe where you chose the other option. That argument relies on there being no element of randomness in the universe, which is where quantum physics makes things difficult. The modern structure of an atom portrays electrons as, rather than defined points of negative charge, more like fields of probability, where the electron's probability is higher the closer it is to the nucleus. But there is a minuscule chance that the electron could be found on the other side of the galaxy. And when posed with this idea, Einstein famously claimed that God does not play dice and dismissed the idea. But more recent evidence has convinced many that the idea of the electron as a field of probability is a useful tool, if nothing else. It helps to explain many effects, such as quantum tunneling, where the electron could tunnel out of an energy well. But still many quantum phenomena remain unanswered, such as quantum entanglement, where particles can be linked and change state depending on the other, despite having no measurable connection to the other particle. Therefore, perhaps it's not measurable, and matter is simply a tool invented by humanity to help explain the chaotic universe in a way we can understand. Perhaps then nature's patterns are not a result of universal mathematical law, but instead maths is just used to explain these phenomena, which would suggest that once humanity disappears, so will mathematics. Gödel's incompleteness theorem proves that maths would need an infinite number of axioms to prove every mathematical statement is either true or false, showing that even given an infinite amount of time, you can't prove all statements with a finite set of axioms. Therefore, if not everything can be explained by maths in a finite duration, then perhaps it's impossible to perfectly predict the future, as each mathematical statement would be in some way linked to something in the universe, which would evidence that some things really are truly unknowable, even given infinite time and information via mathematics. This would imply, at least, that the axiomatic system of mathematics is flawed, and at most, it could even imply that the universe is governed not only by maths, but by other universal fundamentals, whilst a complete overhaul of modern physics as we know it. Is it possible to separate mathematics, then, from the rest of the universe? Or are they intrinsically interwoven and sometimes indistinguishable? Imaginary or complex numbers, with I as root -1, were put forward by ancient Greek mathematician Hero of Alexandria in the 1st century CE. And yet imaginary was originally used as a derogatory term for them by René Descartes, who, along with most other mathematicians, disregarded them entirely, and it was only with the work of Euler and Gauss that imaginary numbers became widely accepted. And it was later still that they were found to be useful in modern physics, with imaginary time being crucial in the development of quantum physics and fluid dynamics, and especially in circuits where it's vital to use imaginary current. Therefore, there is evidence of imaginary numbers in the real world that is having an undeniably real effect on physical things. If even imaginary numbers have some real world equivalent, then isn't it safe to assume everything derived from them must too? You've got to question how reliable modern physics is when it comes to randomness. Could what we perceive as randomness today in reality be explained by some mathematical principle that as of yet we simply do not know? If maths was entirely discovered, then many mathematical ideas become challenging to see as a reality. Finitists accept only the existence of finite mathematical objects and argue the infinite is existing only as a novel thought and not practically in the real world. Though obviously an extreme view, this demonstrates a problem of the infinite or infinitesimal being unable to fuse with our perception of reality. In physics, there is a limit to the magnitude of a quantity before it loses meaning, known as the Planck unit. For example, Planck time is 10 to the minus 43 seconds, and physicists would regard lengths of time shorter than this as being effectively meaningless and having no practical use. Though this solves the problem of the infinite by putting a cap on numbers too small or large, it's of no use in solving the theoretical problem that in our universe we don't know how small things can get and how close to infinitesimal the units are in practicality. At incredibly small and incredibly large magnitudes, the limits of what humans can do is tested. Humans are, after all, active observers, as in we need light waves to bounce off an object to see it. And though this isn't a problem day to day, when the light waves are too big to properly refract from tiny particles, or it can no longer reach our eyes from objects tens of billions of light years away, it becomes a tangible issue. It's therefore currently impossible to know if there's a cap on how big or small an object can be, but merely a cap on what we can observe. It's impossible to test whether the infinite has a place in reality, or if it is simply a helpful but entirely theoretical construct. To what extent, you might ask, does it matter if mathematics is invented or discovered? Is the debate simply an intriguing thought exercise, or something more? If numbers are discovered, rather than invented, then the debate becomes more spiritual in nature in what role numbers might play at large, whether they're in any way tangible, or if it's simply their effects that we can observe. In this case, what then separates maths from something more divine and religious? Would there be an end to mathematics, a point at which every mystery could be explained away and every action predicted? Would there be any point to continued research? And could that research ever have any impact in the real world? If one of the axioms was in some scenario incorrect, then what would explain the actions in the universe? What if then maths was invented and had no part at all in the universe other than a useful logic exercise? In this case, the maths equations merely explain the natural phenomena because they were designed to explain them. And predictions based off mathematics are, though not useless, not completely accurate. Even if you had all the information in the universe and an infinite amount of time, there is no way you could determine actions, as these are decided by some force that can't be explained by maths, or therefore by science. Would this simply open the door to an even bigger universe than we thought, with more at play than simply forces between clumps of particles, or simply make what we had already discovered less valuable, as we knew that some mysteries could never be solved with science? And that's really what I want to leave you with today. Just what you think. Please let me know.